The After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Yes, welcome to The After Show on TelecomTV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and we are broadcasting live and waiting to hear from you at the end of day one of the DSP Leaders Summit on 5G Evolution. We have a great lineup of guests joining us today, and we're going to answer as many of your questions as we can. So if you haven't yet got in touch, then do so now. The sooner the better. Don't leave it too late. Act now to avoid disappointment. There's a form on the website below this video. Well, time to introduce my co-host for the after show, Ray Maistre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Hello, Ray. Now, today we've covered two areas of 5G, the 5G core and also the role of cloud native. What have been the highlights for you?
Well, Guy, what particularly stands out for me is that we've been hearing about real world experience in terms of implementation during these roundtables. And it's clear that the efficiencies that have been talked about for years are now becoming a reality. For example, in terms of fixed mobile asset integration. What's going to be key now is how these new tools and ways of working are translated into new and incremental business opportunities, particularly in enterprise sectors.
Yeah, absolutely, Ray. We now need to see what the DSPs are going to actually do with this technology. So on with the show, and joining us live on the program today are Miguel Carames, who is Director of Network and Technology Planning at Verizon, Paul Miller, Chief Technology Officer for Wind River, Richard Band, Head of Mobile Core and 5G Communication Technology Group, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Dave Boland, Research Director with the Dell'Oro Group. Hello everyone, very good to see you all again. Now we've got lots of audience questions to get through in the next 45 minutes or so. Ray, over to you to start us off.
Great, thanks very much, Guy. So Paul, our first question we're going to put to you today, and that question is there any evidence yet of wide-scale deployments of Cicd pipelines at telcos, especially to support 5G core deployments? And I guess surely this is now becoming an essential requirement, isn't it?
Yes, I can certainly say that it's becoming an essential requirement, but we're not yet at the stage that, at least from my perspective, that we've seen wide-scale deployment of it, right, per the question. But certainly the motivation is there with every carrier globally, especially the tier ones, to move towards that type of approach. It enables a much more rapid deployment of infrastructure changes and application changes throughout a virtualized environment. And it also gives the ability to rapidly bring new feature capabilities into the deployment, as well as using Cicd for the infrastructure itself to dynamically update that infrastructure and keep it current. So it's certainly very, very important. And I think the carriers share the vision of what Cicd, the promise is behind it. But operationalizing it is very difficult, right? Because obviously with a critical service hosting emergency calling and lawful intercept as 5G will be, and is, the need to be able to stage and vet that pipeline of software change to prevent any particular network outages or events that are happening is a tricky thing to work through, right? And I think what we'll see therefore is the early adoption of Cicd will be from the vendors into the labs within the carriers, and then eventually, when really rung out well, you'll see it eventually move into wide-scale deployment use. Okay,
excellent. Thanks, Paul. And certainly from the operators that I've talked to about this, it's almost a bit of a culture shock when these processes are brought into the team. So obviously it'll take a little while to get used to. Okay, so if there isn't any other comment on this question, I think we can go straight to question 2, and over to you, Guy, for that one.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So our next viewer question, and Richard, I think we'll start with you for this one, if that's okay. It's all about automation. The question is, what does automation refer to in the context of cloud native 5G?
Okay, so, well, actually, what Paul was referring to just before, I think, is an important element of automation. So traditionally, I think when we talk about automation, we think about automation in operations And certainly there's still a lot of work to be done there, and certainly the need to do that in 5G, cloud-native 5G, is absolutely there. The complexity of the network, the dynamicity of the network requires an automation in operations. But I think there's a lot of work ongoing, and there's a lot of benefit actually moving up in the chain, early up in the stream, to do a lot of automation as well. I think Paul called it correctly. At this point in time, what you see and what we're certainly doing ourselves is we're using automation in form of CI/CD, automated testing, automated deployment. We're using that very much in our own development. We're using that when we get into the labs of our customers. We are starting to see that that the benefit is actually manifesting. So on our side, we are capable today of deploying a full 5G core in less than 1 hour. When we deploy individual network functions at our customers, we see that it's actually a matter of minutes. And the nice thing about it is when we do it, we actually see also the test results along with it. So it's not just a matter of automating deployment, it's also allowing us to automate the testing that goes with it, so that we can then confidently introduce the change into the network. And then here, as Paul said, we're probably not quite there yet in terms of adapting the processes of the operators, but I'm certainly expecting a lot of benefits in this area. So automation, obviously, again, in operations, but also in what I would classically call the engineering department of the operator. I see a lot of activity there in terms of automation.
Yeah, interesting synergies there with CI/CD. Paul, you like to come back to address some Richard's points there?
Yeah, thanks. And actually, really just to add on to his points, we see automation within the 5G network from really kind of 4 key areas. Understand, of course, that a disaggregated 5G network is highly geo-distributed. So you've got a cloud-native infrastructure that's being deployed across a wide geography, and often with a tier 1 carrier with tens of thousands of nodes. And managing that is a complex thing, and therefore software automation plays a key role in that. One aspect of it is single pane of glass, as well as analytics capabilities for what we call a digital feedback loop that gives the operator the ability to aggregate information from the edge of the network, see that on a single pane of glass, do reporting, analytics, machine learning against that for outage avoidance. That's a tremendous amount of automation being applied to a fully virtualized network. Then we see 3 layers of orchestration and automation. Obviously, the classical role of the NFVO, doing automated application deployment and lifecycle management within the network. But then 2 new layers as we descend down the stack: automation of the deployment and management and update via CI/CD, as we talked about a moment ago, of the cloud-native infrastructure itself. And then operations automation at the lowest layer to provide automation of even base hardware functions like checking firmware revisions and BIOS configurations of platforms before you deploy applications or infrastructure, to make sure you're not about to walk into a problem in the live network with an update or upgrade. So at all those 3 layers, plus the combined digital feedback loop and machine learning engine, there's a tremendous amount of automation being deployed now with modern 5G technology.
Right. Thank you very much, Paul. Yes, please, Dave.
Yeah, just to add on to that also, is preventive maintenance and anticipating outages with artificial intelligence that's supplemented into these automation packages, and being able to move traffic from one part of the network to the other as maybe certain servers are getting overloaded, and being offloading and keeping the network operating efficiently with the help of artificial intelligence.
And Miguel, please.
Yeah, so maybe to add, so we've been doing a lot of automation already in the 4G networks, right? So if you look at some of the operational automation that the previous panelists talked about, a lot of this is happening in the 4G networks today, right? Outage detection, testing, pre and post changes, and so on. I think bringing it all together, so the CI/CD topic that we were discussing earlier, with automation, we've been able to close the loop. It's critical to provide that promise of slicing that 5G is all about, right? So differentiated services that meet SLAs that are critical for a particular use case. The networks are getting increasingly more complicated, right? And the workloads are placed in different parts of the network. And if we don't have automation, it'll really be impossible to deliver on some of that value, because you cannot run the networks in a manual fashion like we used to, maybe in the early days of 4G and certainly in 3G, right? So I think even at the service level, automation does enable that service orchestration, which in turn enables more dynamic and sophisticated slicing.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We just can't stress the importance of automation enough here. Ray, let's go back over to you and let's have a look at our next viewer question.
Okay, thanks, Guy. So here's a question I think we can attribute to the big trend of disaggregation in the industry right now. And Miguel, we're going to start with you with this question. And it is, there are numerous components to the 5G core. The 3GPP actually lists more than 20. And theoretically, that means an operator could have from 1 to 20 or more vendors supplying their 5G core platform. Is there an optimum number of vendors to be had here to ensure a manageable solution?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a tough one. I think the answer is going to depend on the different deployment scenarios. All right, so the answer might well be one or a small number for example, like private deployments. But when we think about our public network, we are strong proponents of best in breed. 20 might be taking it too far. There is some logical pairing of functions where there are similarities. Think about control planes, so your NRF and SCP and SSF and such. There are a lot of similarities, and probably makes sense to kind of group those together. Same on the subscriber database. So the what used to be the HSS is now decomposed into many network functions. But there might be operational benefits and even development kind of simplicity from grouping some of those together, right? So UDM, UDR, USF, and so on. So I mean, I think it's hard to provide a number. I would say maybe 5 to 8 is probably an optimal number on the application side. The one thing that I would add is that's only the application side. And when you look at the rest of the network, so now you have your transport and fabric, and you have your firewalls and security. You have your CAS providers, your tooling. So the reality is you do have a big vendor ecosystem, and you do want to, as much as possible, select the best in breed. And then with that, obviously, as operators are signing up for that increasingly more important role of integrators, which it's a lot of work up front, but it provides a lot of benefits in the long run, right? In that you get kind of really who you believe can help you accomplish your business goals. And then you get the flexibility as well, right? As far as, being able to reuse some of that integration work in the multiple deployment models that you're going to have within the network. Okay,
excellent. A really interesting answer there. I saw Richard with his hand up and Dave as well. So we'll go to Richard first and then up to you, Dave. So Richard.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm a big fan of the best of breed model, and I see the benefit of doing this kind of specialization by vendor by nature, right? We have been historically providing such capabilities, and Miguel was mentioning HLR, HSS, or now UDM, UDSF, UDR. This is exactly where we historically have been playing and where we continue to play. Having said that, what we are observing as well is that some of our customers are absolutely perfectly capable and comfortable doing all of this integration. Others are clearly, a little bit intimidated by the degree of integration, because not only we have the 20 different network functions, but we also have the disaggregation between the hardware layer, the middleware layer, so like a CAS and a PAS, and on top of that, the application. So we have both the integration across the network functions, and I would say that to some degree is relatively straightforward in the sense that 3GPP specifications guide us, and typically vendors adhere to that quite well. But then you also have the vertical integration, so the integration from the infrastructure all the way up to the application. And here I see with cloud native, there is a potential to build multiple network functions from multiple vendors on the same physical infrastructure, on the same middleware layer, and thus achieving a high degree of integration on non-functionals. But obviously that has some cost. So in terms of the question, back to the question of how many is the right number, I think the more important thing is do your vendors have compatible characteristics in terms of the way that they implement things? What we see, we've done a lot of integration work with different partners. We've worked with Casa, with Affirmed, with Metaswitch, with OpenNet, Samsung. We've worked with quite a few. What we found was on the non-functional side, for those vendors that have like a real evolution towards cloud native, have adopted a set of open source components on non-functional, we can go pretty fast and we can go pretty deep in terms of integration. When you find somebody that has a different approach, then obviously the integration is more limited and the benefits of the integration will be more limited because it will stop at the functional level.
Okay, excellent. Great insights, Richard. Thanks very much. And Dave, then on to you. What are your thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, just kind of echoing what Miguel and Robert had to say is that there's a natural packaging of the if you will, of the core functions in about 7 areas that the vendors that can offer all of the 5G core package it into usually around 7 things, like the packet core, control plane, the packet core, user plane, the subscriber data management, the policy, the signaling, the shared data layer are some of the natural ways that they get packaged. But as it was just pointed out, some vendors or some operators want to pick and choose even within each one of those sections to further optimize if they feel that one vendor can't do it. But you also could have geographic choices too. If you have regional cores, you could say one vendor in one region and one vendor in another as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm sure there's going to be some of that, those different regional combinations. But I think the dynamic is going to be really interesting between the requirement for best of breed, but also the traditional 1 or 2 suppliers will want to continue to dominate the market, and whether they can bring the different partners together to continue in that role is going to be very interesting. So great insights there. Thanks very much. Guy, over to you for the next question.
Yep, thanks Ray. And a reminder to our viewers, keep the questions coming please, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. Right, so next question from our audience to all of you. And Richard, maybe I could start with you on this one. What role do analytics tools play in standalone 5G core platforms?
Okay, so I would say the analytics is absolutely, it's clearly linked with the automation topic we discussed. We have a network that is highly complex. So we just talked about the 20 network functions. We talk about the disaggregation between the hardware and the software. Even if you go inside the network functions, they are based out of cloud native microservices. So there is definitely a large volume of elements to be managed that then get put into different slices, and those slices themselves are dynamic. So you may imagine that the complexity of managing all of that across different geographical distribution is a significant challenge. Automation is key, but automation requires the analytics to be able to function. So at a very, very fundamental point, I think you need analytics to do the automation. This starts by aggregating all the data at a very low level from the individual microservices, aggregating those into relevant KPIs for the network functions, for the slices, and then tying that into rules that allow you to act upon that either manually with operator intervention, and there will be certain activities that you do not want to make in a fully automated closed loop. But a lot of that actually needs to go into a closed loop so that the network can respond in real time to demand of the customers. We did an exercise with Orange Labs about last year, where we were showing how automation analytics work together to create a network slice on demand when traffic conditions are degrading. Now, why is analytics important? Again, the individual network functions are broken down. They do not necessarily have insight as to what's happening in the wider network. So you need to aggregate, you need to look for patterns, and then you can act upon that. So analytics is very important there. At the next stage, I expect analytics to become something that we will exploit also to gain insights that can be leveraged not just for operations, but at the business level depending on different use case scenarios, depending on different industry verticals. But I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the first focus will be definitely on enabling the operational automation.
Thanks, Richard. And Paul, why are analytics tools important for 5G core platforms, and what role do they play?
So I think that Richard did a phenomenal job answering that question. I actually think that he's spot on point. Obviously the complexity of this software implementation, the infrastructure, the hardware drives a need for an analytics foundation, a digital feedback loop where you can get access to data from the running infrastructure to manage that environment. The piece I'd layer on to his foundational answer is really the extension of that becomes the platform for machine learning and artificial intelligence. Once you have an analytics system and a data collection engine that goes with that, you now have the ability to bring in machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence to train and act on the data that's coming in from the network. And for such a highly complex implementation, that's really key, right? The ability for a human being to look across this is really unquestioned. It's not possible, right? So you need to have that software automation and machine learning capabilities there. This begins to provide the ability for things like predictive analytics and predictive outage avoidance and aberrant detection before an event actually can cause service disruption to the end customer. So analytics is really the foundation of those capabilities, and the growth of beyond that for machine learning and artificial intelligence and the automation of managing a network. That's what we see the real future of analytics and in 5G is all about.
Thank you, Paul. And Miguel, would you like to comment on this question?
Yeah, so definitely agree with both Paul and Richard on the operational side of analytics and the criticality of those analytics to be able to run the network. Then doubling down on the services side, when you think about some of the services that we are already building on top of 5G, like multi-edge compute, like MEC, and then again, like the type of differentiated services that we're going to be supporting through slicing, there is a lot of need to expose the analytics to the user of the slice or the user of the service, right? And so it's increasingly becoming a requirement on the enterprise side and on all these B2B2C type relationships, where if we are to offer a premium service of any time, be it latency or any of the other currencies, we as service providers will have to be able to provide the analytics that support kind of the service that we're providing, so the customer can assess if they are getting their money's worth. So it's a service layer need as well. And then whether in addition to supporting kind of the requirements from the customer, we can use it to monetize and provide additional value-added services, I think it's a developing area. But even just kind of proving that we are delivering the service that 5G promises makes analytics a critical component of the solution.
Yeah, as you say, it definitely plays a critical role in 5G. Well, thanks everyone for your answers to that. Ray, over to you.
Thanks, Guy. So Dave, we're going to come to you, and this is your first time on the after show, and I hope not the last. But so we have to ask you, as this is your debut, what got you into the telecoms industry? How did you get your start in telecoms?
Well, I started my career with General Electric in the mid-'70s, so that tells you how long I've been around. And we're driving with the general manager to the airport, just the two of us in the car, and all of a sudden he gets on his two-way radio that General Electric made at the time for police and public safety, but of course General Electric has it for their general managers to have it in their car. And I says, wow, this is great, mobile communications. And I was hooked and been involved in it since the day one of cellular.
Right. Wow. Absolutely. Well, that you must have been to all of the Mobile World Congresses possible to go to. Then I'd imagine over the years. But that's a great way to get into the industry, to see it in action and then be inspired to get involved. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Dave. So here's the question that's come in that we're going to put to you today. It seems like a lot is hanging on the potential of standalone 5G core platforms. Is there any evidence yet of game-changing activity from initial 5G core deployments?
Yeah, China was kind of got off the dime a little bit quicker than the rest of the world. They have their 5G standalone networks by all three service providers are pretty much nationwide now. But I think the most progressive one has been China Mobile, having over 400 edge sites up and running and providing more latency sensitive applications. And that's one of the big opportunities that 5G offers is edge computing. So seeing edge computing in operating and in being taken advantage of in China, I think to see it actually happening, you see 8K video analytics and video inspection, smart mines, smart ports with automated guided vehicles or remote crane operations, smart grid applications. To see all this come to fruition in commercial deployments is certainly very exciting to see. We already see it in some of the Verizon networks where some of their standalone enterprise applications, they haven't gone commercial yet for the broad, I don't believe, Miguel, I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, gone broad nationwide yet with their 5G core standalone yet. But we see it coming. It's very close. And we see islands of applications throughout America and Europe, and expect a lot more. I think another dynamic thing that's happening is the evaluation of whether something that hasn't been considered before is whether having the cloud service providers host the 5G core. And a lot of operators are now looking at that as a potential of, can they leverage the 5G public cloud? The public cloud, is there an advantage for a 5G service provider to do that? And I think there's a lot of evaluation going on right now in consideration to that aspect. So that could be another game changer that comes out of the 5G deployment scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting. I think Telefonica Deutschland, I think, is going with AWS for the deployment of its 5G core, as is Dish in the US. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Paul, I see you want to come in on this, and Richard as well. So Paul, we'll come to you first.
Thanks, Ray. So I think I wanted to echo a bit of what Dave said. Our company is a little unique in that we also sell into a set of other vertical industries like aerospace and defense and industrial telecommunications, of course, included in there, and others. In particular, in the industrial sector, we're seeing a real interest in standalone 5G core and, in fact, private 5G, the ability to offer a completely integrated solution for deployment within an industrial environment to support the automation of that manufacturing facility. We've seen some interesting data that really Wi-Fi and previous RF technologies have not taken on because of reliability concerns. 5G is the first capability that should address those concerns well. And there's significant cost in the manufacturing sector. They have up to, say, 40 euros per meter to move Ethernet cables around and whatnot as they reconfigure their manufacturing environment. So 5G solves that for them. We're also doing some interesting work with customers in Germany in this type of industrial sector where additional support of things like NVIDIA GPU on the edge compute platform enable you to do advanced augmented reality applications in the manufacturing environment. So really a lot of interest for new use cases around 5G and standalone 5G with the private 5G market, if you will, that a lot of the carriers sell into as well as independent companies are addressing. So some tremendous interest there for some really interesting use cases.
Yep, absolutely. And in fact, today we saw an announcement from Telefonica and Microsoft Azure that they've combined to go into those private 5G industrial networks. Richard, over to you for comment on these 5G core deployments and whether we're seeing any game-changing activity yet.
Yeah, I wanted to just pick up on the point about the public cloud providers and the private networking. What I'm observing today is that the ability to take the 5G standalone core and put it in operation and start playing around with it to see what new use cases are relevant. I'm actually positively surprised by the speed at which we're doing this, and I'm seeing more activity at the moment, or faster activity, on the private networking side, particularly with the public cloud providers. So you mentioned Azure. We have other activities ongoing with AWS. So we definitely see a desire to experiment. The cloud providers have taken their infrastructure offer to the edge as well. So that's definitely helping and giving an impetus here. And to a degree, I guess the fact that private 5G typically is deployed more as a greenfield than as a brownfield, there's not the complexity of 4G, 5G interworking. The decision-making processes are big quicker. And so we're starting to see actual experimentation. We see this being deployed in oil rigs. We see activities in trains. So we have one customer that wanted to see if they could run a 5G network in a train. And given that the train is a moving vehicle, they wanted to have the core inside the train. And the nice thing about the cloud native implementations that we've been talking about is it actually scales very big, but it can scale down very well as well and be put on a single, in our case, in HP, we have the edge line. You can put it on a single edge line and just transport it everywhere you want. So I'm starting to see that, as I said, oil and gas, transportation, defense industry, definitely very interested. So we're starting to see use cases emerging there, yes.
Dave, back to you.
Just to come back to highlight what Richard was saying as far as making it mobile, we see a lot in the defense industry as well, where they can actually put the 5G core in a backpack and for field deployments and move the 5G network around as the troops move around. So there's a big interest in the military as well.
Absolutely. But now after Richard's comment, I can't get the thought of a 5G core being pushed along in the tea trolley down the aisle of a train. That's the only image I've got in my mind now. So we'll try and get rid of that by handing back over to Guy.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. I've not seen a train for about a year and a half. Right, before we continue with our questions, let's check in on our audience poll, because we run a new poll for each day of the summit. One question, 5 multiple choice answers. It's right here on the website and it's quick and easy to do. Now, today's question is, will the deployment of standalone core platforms be the turning point for 5G and enable service providers to benefit from its full potential? And you can see the current split of opinions right here. Fence sitters in the middle have it at the moment, although we are skewing towards the positive there. Yes, substantially skewing towards the positive. Well, let us know what you think and click on your answer selection. We're keeping the polls open all week, and the more responses we get, the more representative it will be. Final numbers and analysis will be shared after this summit. Right, back to our Q&A. We're about, looking at the clock, 35 minutes into the programme now, but we still have time to answer a few more of your questions, so please keep them coming in. Ray, have we got our next viewer question?
Yes, Guy, we do. And we've got a question here that looks like it's come from the 5G Core Roundtable that went on demand for on-demand viewing today. And the question is, it's an object of faith that 5G is going to deliver new monetizable services for CSPs. Well, as we've just seen in the question there for the poll. However, we never seem to get beyond 5G network technology being good. Does 5G success ultimately depend on the CSPs solving real customer problems and marketing this and not talking about 5G technology deployments and how capable it is? So this really is, I guess, turning these 5G core deployments that we've just been talking about into monetizable services. So the question is, I guess, can the industry reach this point? Are we going to go wide scale with some of these examples of the services we've just been talking about in the past few minutes? Does anybody want to pick up on this question first? The monetizing of enterprise 5G. Okay, Paul, I think you just beat Richard there, so we'll come to you first, Paul, and then across to Richard.
You'll have to give us little buttons to press, Ray. Yeah, so I think that really you've got a logical evolution here as to what's going to happen. There's going to be a progression towards that goal. So, for example, we know that a lot of these new revenue streams that the operator has the potential of benefiting from are from very modern contemporary use cases, augmented reality, like we talked about, or autonomous vehicles, drones, Industrial 4.0, expansion of IIoT, sensors, right? These are the things that are going to produce new incremental revenue beyond just the commercial mobile business. And in order to get there, edge compute and intelligent edge systems are the enablers for these things. So things like MEC, as Miguel talked about, or just bringing virtualization to the edge of the network so that you can host these types of applications. Now, in order to do that, you need a business motivator that can survive business case analysis to deploy edge compute. So you have that infrastructure capability across the network. And 5G is the first technology, even though today we're very focused on the fundamentals of getting 5G to work, both private standalone as well as the higher scale work. That's the first time a technology has enabled a service provider to provide a virtualization framework from the core all the way to the edge, right? NFV allowed us to build that at the core, but now 5G is really a business case that justifies building virtualization all the way to the edge of the network. And once that infrastructure is in place, it then enables the deployment of new advanced applications through MEC infrastructure or from reusing the general purpose compute that's at the edge of the network, hosting VCU and VDU functions, for example, for 5G. So I see this as a natural progression. You'll see the 5G network built first as a result of that drive, and then the ability to then expand and reuse that for these advanced applications to generate new revenue streams.
Yep, I mean, that's clearly the hope of the industry. So Richard, we'll come across to you. Does 5G's success ultimately depend on getting these services out and driving revenues from them?
Yeah, I think Paul actually teed it up pretty nicely. I mean, the focus today is on building the network, and obviously that's the first thing we have to do. But I think that the big difference compared to what has happened in the past is in the past, once we had built the network, it was a matter of marketing the service, but the service was pretty much defined. The offer, the value proposition was first, mobile connectivity, and then giving you more minutes and megabytes as we moved from 2G to 3G to 4G, right? 5G in my mind is very different. The connectivity is just the starting point of the discussion. And then you need to weave the connectivity into the core business process of, say, transportation or healthcare or oil and gas. And so the only way to do that is to work with industry vertical partners that perfectly understand that particular vertical, understand the core business process, and then figure out how we can transform or optimize said process by applying 5G connectivity. And that means that the ability to monetize 5G is just not just a technological challenge of building the best network. It's also about building a different way of going to market, is engaging, building up a partner ecosystem, and is being able to have a customer conversation that is about business outcomes rather than just the lowest possible price for the biggest data bundle. And I think that's a big challenge for the telecom industry. I think, broadly speaking, we have had a tendency to build horizontal solutions, and then it was just a matter of marketing and bundling and pricing it creatively, depending on the segment you're addressing. Here, I think we need to go one step further. The connectivity is the starting point, but then we need to build true verticalized offers, and we need industry vertical partners. So the ability to build that ecosystem, to partner, to open up the network, I think is fundamental.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm sure the CFOs at the telcos will certainly be seeing successful 5G as something that delivers to the top and bottom line. Dave, you wanted to come in there as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to amplify what Richard just said. It's essential. I think it's imperative if service providers want to grow their revenue stream, because the enhanced mobile broadband is just, they can't increase their revenues. We consume more data, but the price per bit's going down, and the cost per bit that we're paying is going down, and it's harder to increase the revenues in the consumer space. So this is a great opportunity to go after the verticals and increase the revenues, and it's an imperative if service providers want to grow their revenues.
Absolutely. Okay, excellent. Thanks very much. Guy, it looks like we're going back over to you for what will be the final question for today's show.
Indeed, Ray, discussion's going so well that we've probably just got time for one more question only. Well, in fact, we've had a couple of questions about the same subject, actually. I wonder if they're from the same person. It's all about SUPI and SUKI, and that's Subscription Permanent Identifier and Subscription Concealed Identifier to you and I. I confess I had to go to the 3GPP's website to investigate that in more detail. And from what I gather here, to simplify greatly, this is kind of like the IMSI replacement and designed to be a lot more secure. So I'm just going to pick the broadest of these questions, and that is, do you think Subscription Concealed Identifier plays a vital role in 5G compared to what we had with 3G and 4G? Is anybody able to help us with the technical aspects of this question? Miguel?
Yeah, so I mean, we actually see SUKI as one of the key technical benefits that you get with standalone. So if you look at like a little bit of a history lesson, if you go back to 4G, there were certain assumptions made in terms of security. So one was that your private identity or your IMSI, like you said earlier, could be in some cases communicated over the air. And it was safe because it was hard or nearly impossible for anybody to eavesdrop that IMSI and then use it for nefarious purposes. And that's probably still the case. It's hard to do it, and it's really hard for somebody to be able to get the access and the other information that I would need to take full advantage of that. But it's been proven through academic research and so on that it can be done. So SUKI was introduced in 3GPP to basically address this foundationally in the standards, right? Make sure that your private identity is never sent in the open over the air. So you address this particular vulnerability, if you will. And so very important for our public safety customers and government officials and enterprise. But really, if you think about the 5G as being a secure foundation or a platform like we were discussing before, upon which you're going to be building really the way your customers use services for the next 10 years on the consumer as well as on the enterprise side, it's important that we take advantage of these capabilities that the specs are offering, right? And so that's what SUKI is all about, is hardening the air interface, if you could. And I think is very important and definitely a topic of interest in the North American market.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for that. Richard, do you like to come in and add a little bit more about what SUKI can do? Because I guess, to my mind, it's countering this man-in-the-middle kind of malicious attacks that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, the identity, your mobile identity, has become much more important than it was a few years ago. I live in France. So I'm part of the European Union. These days, pretty much every transaction I do on my bank account needs to be verified with a message to my mobile. And the assumption is, your mobile is something that is inviolable and it's with you, so your identity is safe here. If that gets cracked, the consequences of stealing your identity is much, much bigger today than it was 5-10 years ago. So I think, first of all, that makes it a more attractive target, and that means we need to protect it better. Then, as Miguel was referring to, there's public safety, military. So, as I said, I'm in France, but I'm actually originally from the Netherlands, so I continue to follow what happens there. And a few years ago, we had military in Afghanistan, and in fact, what was found back then was, thanks to the communications they were having, I don't remember exactly the communications channels they were using, but they were able, they were being pinpointed specific individuals in specific places, and so they were able to build patterns of movement that obviously are things that, as a military, you do not want to go out in the open. So clearly, there's other very serious concerns associated with the identity theft. Actually, lives can be at stake. So clearly, it's worth protecting this, and I think SUKI is a very good development there.
Excellent, thank you for that. Yeah, we certainly cannot afford to drop the ball on security with 5G. Well, unless anybody else wants to come in on that final question, then I would say that we are out of time. Thank you all very much indeed to all our guests who joined us for this live program, and also to our audience for sending in their questions. Now, we'll be back tomorrow with another live after-show programme, but before we go, we want to let you know about our post-show report.
Yeah, that's right, Guy. We have a delegate report that we produce after each summit with highlights of each session and a reminder of the summit's full content. Now, this is available free to download for those who have registered for the event. And as a bonus for the 5G Evolution Summit, all registrants can also download an exclusive special report on 5G from our partner, renowned research house, the Deloro Group. So there are plenty of good reasons to register.
Indeed, and if you register for the summit, not only do you receive the reports, but you get to send in your questions for the after show. And as we keep saying, the sooner you send them in, the better chance of them being included in the live show. I mean, I've just seen a question come in now, and unfortunately it's too late for today's show, so we'll hold it over for tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, try not to submit your questions until 35 or 45 minutes into the show. It doesn't leave us with too much opportunity to get them added to the live show. Get them in nice and early, and they'll be earlier in the queue. We love to hear from all of you at any time, of course, but it really is a case of the sooner the better.
Yes, and we start tomorrow's 5G Evolution Day 2 with a roundtable discussion on 5G private network opportunities featuring Deutsche Telekom and Orange, amongst others. And we also hear more about enterprise 5G from BT. Then Ray and I are back for the live after show. So join us tomorrow. Goodbye for now.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.